Who really decides elections in Quebec? Francophone voters do. And if you're not competitive with them, you don't win power. Next on this thing. Welcome to This Thing, Quebec Politics with an Accent, a podcast where we try to make sense of Quebec politics for a Canadian audience. This week, we're looking at something simple, but often misunderstood. Because if you follow Quebec politics, you've probably seen the polls, and they look competitive, but they don't tell the whole story. Quebec uses the same electoral system as the rest of Canada. It's not about the popular vote, it's about the number of ridings. In Quebec, 125 seats. Win the most seats, you form government. Win 63, you form a majority government. But here's what people often miss. Not all ridings are the same. Most ridings in Quebec are majority francophone. Voters whose first language or language used at home is French. And they don't just exist, they dominate the map. Roughly 90 to 100 out of 125. Those are the ridings where francophone voters are the majority. On the map, it's all the blue ridings. The red is basically Montreal and the surroundings, where francophones, where those ridings, francophones are in a minority. That 90 to 100 seats explains why we call, or partly explains why we call Quebec a nation. So you might already be seeing where we're heading. If most seats are decided where francophone voters are, that's where elections are decided. You can win almost all non-francophone votes and still not win power. Not because those votes don't matter, but because non-francophone votes represent roughly 20 to 25% of the electorate, and they're highly concentrated, mostly in Montreal and the surrounding areas. So you win big there, but it doesn't translate to enough seats to win power. Meanwhile, the rest of Quebec, that's where francophone voters are spread across most ridings. That's where elections are actually decided. So the real battleground is francophone Quebec. If you don't win enough francophone votes, you don't win power. Elections are not about total votes. They're about where those votes are. You see this at the federal level too. A party can be strong in one part of the country, but if it's not where the most seats are, they will lose. In Quebec, this goes further because it's not only geography, it's identity. French is a minority language in North America. So even though francophones are the majority in Quebec, they think politically like a minority. There's a sense that this majority has to be used not just to govern, but to protect. Sometimes through laws, sometimes through debates, and sometimes through a shared understanding that protection isn't optional. That creates a constant political force, a pressure to use power to protect language and identity. So when you look at the map again, it's not just geography. It's a political reality shaped by that pressure. And because those voters are spread across most of the province, they decide most of the seats, which means they decide who governs Quebec. Francophone Quebec, that's where power is won. Let's take the last election, 2022. The Liberal Party of Quebec dominated the non-francophone voters, 70 to 80% roughly. But among francophones, only 10 to 15%. So what happens with those numbers? They win 21 seats, the vast majority except one, in the Greater Montreal area. Now, conversely, let's look at the CAQ, the party that won that election, and currently the government. The CAQ among non-francophones hit about 10 to 15% of the voters. But among francophones, the CAQ scored around 45 to 50%. And that changes everything. Result? 90 seats, a comfortable majority government. So let's pause here to really understand these numbers because this is central to any Quebec election. On one side, the Liberal side, in 2022, 70 to 80% non-francophone, 10 to 15% francophone. 70-80, 10-15. On the other side, the CAQ, 10 to 15% among non-francophone and 40 to 50 among francophones. That's the ball game. That's the election. It's not about total support. It's about where that support is. One party, the Liberal, win big in a small number of seats, and conversely, the CAQ wins where the most seats are. That's what decides power. Once you understand this, Quebec politics becomes much clearer. Let's look at what it means today for each party looking forward to the next fall election. For the Parti Québécois, it's simple. If the PQ wins the francophone votes, they win power. That's their entire path to form government. Their challenge is simple. Unify the francophone votes across the whole province, not only in strongholds. For the Liberal Party of Quebec, they start off with a strong base of non-francophone voters, as we saw. That base is loyal and it's concentrated mostly in the Greater Montreal area. But for the Liberals to win power, they need to reach at least 25% of the francophone voters. That's their magic number. In order to get to 25% from the francophone voters, they will have to message to the whole francophone electorate. Without that threshold, the Liberals reach a ceiling. Ceiling reached in 2022 when they won only 21 seats. So for the Liberals, it's simple. The path to power is to coalesce that non-francophone votes with at least 25 to 30% of the francophone voters. If they're successful, that combination gets them to power. So let's talk Coalition Avenir Québec, the CAQ, the current government. The coalition is built on francophone voters. That's what brought them to power in 2018 and got them re-elected in 2022. Because the Coalition Avenir Québec mostly relies on francophone voters, they are in direct competition with the Parti Québécois, who does the same. Both those parties' main electorate is the francophone voters. And hence, if they do split that vote, both of them will lose. Right now, the Parti Québécois is way ahead in the francophone vote. Not even close. Now, the Parti conservateur du Québec, the PCQ, that's the new kid on the block. They're polling in the mid-teens with a strong concentration around the Quebec City area and its South Shore. They will need to increase support among francophone voters across Quebec to have a chance to win power. But with the current voters' concentration, realistically, lots of seats are winnable. Québec solidaire. The Progressive Party is strong in cities, especially Montreal. and stronger with younger urban voters where universities are, but not enough presence across francophone ridings to hope to form government. To win, they need to expand and go beyond the urban strongholds. So when you look at province-wide polls, they can look competitive, but that can be misleading because those numbers combine support across the whole province, even when the support is concentrated in certain areas. And elections are not decided province-wide. They're decided riding by riding. The Liberal Party of Quebec dominates the non-francophone vote, and that vote is heavily concentrated in Montreal. So it shows up strongly in the overall numbers, but it doesn't translate into enough seats. Elections are not won in Montreal. They are won in the rest of Quebec. So who really decides elections in Quebec? Francophone Quebec. Because that's where the most seats are. And if a party cannot win there, they cannot win power. This is Distinct, Quebec politics with an accent. Clear breakdowns of Quebec politics every week. I'm Farouk Karim. À la semaine prochaine.